So, Jonathan, I mean, look, these are not the same three kinds of things. I mean, when Trump talks about places like Greenland and Panama, he talks about saving Americans money. He talks about accessing resources. Can you explain the thinking there as opposed to what he's talking about when he says maybe Canada should be the 51st state?
Yeah, I mean, Chris, I hesitate to get inside the mind of the president-elect exactly, but I think what seems clear is that he is having fun at the expense of Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau there, having fun at the expense of the Canadian people. Obviously, Canada is a large country with tremendous, vast resources. Anybody would want Canadian territory, but as it stands right now, it's, the closest ally of the United States, and it's a huge physical buffer. We've got oceans on our east, on our west. We've got Canada to the north. And Mexico to the south, that we were involved in serious economic treaties with. So we're in a pretty good security situation. I'm not sure why anybody would want to mess that up. With regard to Greenland and Panama, there are economic reasons to be interested in those things. But the Danes, as Aaron said, are not interested in selling Greenland, and the Panamanians are not interested in giving up control of the canal, which is obviously a huge economic driver for them. So unless President-elect Trump is willing to go to war with these countries, I think this is mostly just talk and an effort to intimidate a little bit.
Well, there's no doubt, Congressman, that sometimes Donald Trump just likes to start a conversation or get attention for something he says. But let's talk about Panama. I want to play for you what Trump's former chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney, said about it.
This is a negotiation. By the way, one of the reasons Trump is so good at negotiating is that it's a credible threat. If he says, look, we are going to have problems with Panama if they don't lower the rates, I don't envision American troops going in to retake the canal. But you got to think that someone's out there scratching their head going, is Donald Trump crazy enough to do something like that? And it's that viable threat that sort of gives him negotiating leverage that not a lot of other folks could ever come up with.
Is that the most likely thing, Carlos, that this is all a negotiation?
Well, Chris, I do think that's the most likely scenario here. And Donald Trump has really managed to find an intersection point between isolationism and imperialism or expansionism, which I think a lot of people around the world are probably scratching their heads. But I will say this, in terms of negotiation tactics, obviously, if the president can extract some kind of benefit for U.S. industry, for U.S. exporters, that would be a good thing. But there is a risk in offending and embarrassing foreign leaders. I mean, these are people, at least in these three countries, who have to get elected to be in office. They have to be respected by their own populations. And these kinds of insults, could provoke them into a confrontation with the United States. And obviously not a military confrontation, because none of those countries could compete with us in that way. But it really does just kind of deteriorate the relations between the U.S. and other countries. And we know that can be important when it comes time to build international coalitions, when it comes time to try to sign new trade agreements. So there is a risk here, even if it's a negotiation tactic.
Yeah, I think, Jonathan, Corey Lewandowski told NEWSMAX that Trump's recent calls to have the U.S. claim the Panama Canal and Greenland were purposefully outrageous declarations. But if that's the case, is there danger in treating international diplomacy as some kind of game?
So, number one, I don't think Corey Lewandowski speaks for Donald Trump. Corey Lewandowski is somebody who's been close to him at certain points, but the idea that Corey Lewandowski is,
well, I don't know if he speaks for him, but he has an opinion about, that he thinks that this is, frankly, purposefully outrageous.
But here's the danger. This is what I think the danger is. I think Congressman Corbello is right. I think the danger is that you end up alienating allies. You end up, putting these folks in a bad position, and they may make decisions that are adverse to you as a result of it. The other thing is, I mean, if anybody took seriously that Donald Trump was thinking about using American military force, especially against, say, Canada, there's this whole group called NATO, and Canada is a NATO ally that we have treaties not to attack, and B, a defensive of NATO countries agreement among NATO countries. So it's not that he would be attacking Canada, it's that he would be attacking the entire Western alliance. I don't think any of that's going to happen for mostly that reason. But look, Trump wants to cause trouble, stir up some chaos, and see what falls out of the trees. He's going to continue to do that for the next 4 years. It's not what he campaigned on. He campaigned on reducing inflation. He campaigned on, securing the border. I don't think he was talking about the Canadian border, but he now has the power to do all the other things that he would like to.
I think there is another question, Congressman, and that is, we saw when the country seemed headed potentially for a shutdown that there was a line that some members of Congress were drawing. It raises the question, even if Trump were to be serious about any of this, would Congress support him? Would Republicans in Congress support him?
Well, Chris, I think it's pretty clear that for decisions where congressional approval or support is required, some Republicans, both in the House and Senate, have already shown a willingness to stand up for those institutions and say, we're not going to support the president here, even though he's very popular right now, especially among Republicans, and did have a strong electoral college victory in this last election. Of course, in the Senate, we saw how a group of senators immediately shot down the Matt Gaetz appointment. Some people were wondering if that was going to happen. And in the House, when the former and future president came together with Elon Musk to try to maybe intimidate some of the members or force them to raise the debt ceiling, a pretty significant number of them said, no, we're not going to do it. So I do think when Congress is involved, we're going to see more policy stability for the decisions that President Trump can make on his own. I think that's where we're going to see more instability and a lack of predictability.
So, Jonathan, look, he's not even president yet, obviously. He is the president-elect. But if you're a member of the U.S. Senate and you just got reelected to a 6-year term and he's going to be gone in 4 years, I mean, do you think that there's any doubt that we're going to have these situations where Donald Trump wants something and it's either going to be fish or cut bait? They're going to have to decide whether or not they have a line.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, Chris, let me just say, if I was a United States senator who just got elected to a 6-year term, I'd be asking for time off for good behavior, because that seems like a terrible body to be serving in right now, kind of for the reason that you point out and the reason the congressman points out. Yeah, I mean, they're going to have to make determinations of, all the time about not only what do they do in terms of the places where they have power, but what do they say about what the new president is doing himself. We have seen, as the congressman said, moments where they stood up to him. They basically told him to take a flying leap when he nominated Matt Gaetz to be Attorney General. We may see some of those other nominees fall by the wayside. We have to wait and see what happens in January. But yeah, I mean, these senators are going to be put in a bad position. And for the Republican senators, they're going to be put in the bad position of, having to break with the Trump base every time they break with him. And his outside allies, we've seen this before, Steve Bannon and others, will put tremendous pressure on those senators who are breaking with him every time that they do it, every time that they can be found out to be doing it, because sometimes it's behind the scenes. They're, not providing their votes for things without actually having votes on the floor. So we're going to see that dynamic in play. And at the same time, you're going to see Democratic senators put in a bad position every time he does something that crosses party lines, crosses ideological lines, and seems to appeal to Democratic voters.